I never thought safety could be an illusion. You grow up thinking your best friend's home is a second home, somewhere filled with laughter, secrets, sleepovers, and shared snacks. For me, it was that kind of place, until one night changed everything. What began as a typical weekend with my best friend slowly unraveled into something I still struggle to talk about. This is my true story, the story of how trust was broken in a way I never saw coming. It all started during my junior year of college. I was home for the summer, and things were quiet. My parents had taken a trip abroad, and I stayed behind to focus on my internship. My best friend, Olivia, invited me to stay over at her house for a few days. We'd known each other since we were kids. Our families were close, and her dad, Mr. Thompson, had always been friendly, strict but respectful. He was a lawyer, sharp and serious most of the time, but he'd crack a joke here and there. Nothing ever felt uncomfortable before, not until that summer. Olivia's mom was away visiting her sister, and Olivia was excited for a few days of freedom. We stayed up late watching movies, eating junk food, and talking about everything: boys, life, our future plans. It felt like the good old days. But something felt different in the air. It's hard to explain, but Mr. Thompson had been unusually present. He'd linger in the living room longer than usual. He'd ask questions that felt too personal. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe I was overthinking. Maybe I was just being paranoid. But I should have listened to that feeling in my gut. Late one evening, Olivia dozed off while we were watching a movie in the den. I got up to get a glass of water. The house was dark and quiet. As I passed the hallway, I felt someone behind me. I turned around, and there he was, with Mr. Thompson. His eyes didn't look like the father figure I had always known. His smile wasn't the same. Something about the way he stood there made my heart drop. He asked me why I was still awake. I tried to keep it casual, but my hands were shaking. Then he stepped closer. In that moment, everything changed. It's hard to describe the fear that rushed through me. You never expect danger to come from the people you trust most. I was in my best friend's house, somewhere I had felt safe for years. But suddenly, it didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like I was trapped. What happened next turned my world upside down. It tested my strength, my loyalty, and even my friendship with Olivia. This is not just a story about infidelity. It's about betrayal, blurred lines, and how one night can leave you questioning everything you thought you knew. And as much as I wish I could say that was the worst of it, the truth is, it was only the beginning. I stood there frozen, clutching my glass of water, trying to make sense of what was happening. Mr. Thompson didn't do anything right away, he just stared for a second too long. Long enough to make the silence feel heavy, like the air had thickened. I mumbled something about being tired and turned back toward the den. But as I walked away, I could feel his eyes still on me. My heart was pounding. I didn't know if I was overreacting or if something really was wrong. But deep down, I already knew the answer. The next morning, I tried to act normal. Olivia had no idea anything felt off. She was cheerful, laughing about something we'd watched the night before, completely unaware of the tension I was carrying. I wanted to tell her, to ask if her dad had ever made her feel weird. But I couldn't bring myself to say the words. How do you tell your best friend that her dad made you uncomfortable? That the man you'd trusted for years suddenly felt like a stranger? We went about our day like usual, ran some errands, grabbed coffee, talked about classes and life. But every time we came back to the house, I felt uneasy. Mr. Thompson would greet us politely, but there was something behind his words now. A tone I hadn't noticed before. Too friendly. Too familiar. I tried staying out of his way, keeping busy with Olivia, keeping the door shut when we were in her room. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. That night, I told Olivia I wasn't feeling well and pretended to fall asleep early. I just needed space. I needed to think. As I lay there staring at the ceiling, Questions ran through my head. Had I misread everything? Was I just being paranoid? Or was this the beginning of something bigger, something I didn't want to face? I thought about my parents, how they trusted Olivia's family. How they would have never imagined I'd feel this way under that roof. I didn't know what to do. Leaving suddenly would raise questions. Staying felt risky. And worst of all, I didn't want to lose my best friend. But deep down, I knew I couldn't ignore what I felt. Something was happening. Something that hadn't fully unfolded yet. And then, the door creaked. Slowly. Quietly. Just enough to make my heart stop. My breath caught in my throat as I stared at the half-open door. I didn't move. I couldn't. The hallway was dark, and for a second, I thought maybe it was just the wind, or maybe Olivia had gotten up for water. But no footsteps followed. No voices. Just silence. I waited, eyes wide, heart racing. After a minute that felt like forever, I got up quietly and locked the door. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely turn the latch. I didn't sleep that night. The next day, I tried to convince myself it was nothing. Maybe the door hadn't been shut all the way. Maybe I was letting my anxiety run wild. But then Olivia mentioned her dad had asked if I was okay, that he was worried about me, that I seemed tense. The way she said it didn't sit right. I didn't even know he noticed I was feeling tense. That only made me more sure I wasn't imagining anything. I started texting my cousin, Sam, who lived nearby. I didn't give him details, just said I might need a ride home soon. I couldn't explain everything over the phone. I didn't want to put it in writing, didn't want proof of something I hadn't even figured out yet. At the same time, I began paying more attention to the way Mr. Thompson acted, not just with me, but in general. The way he touched Olivia's shoulder when she walked past, the way he always seemed to pop up when we were alone, it all started to add up. And then another strange thing happened. Olivia's older brother, Jason, came home unexpectedly from college that weekend. He hadn't been home in months, but suddenly he was there, and the energy in the house shifted. Jason didn't talk much to his dad. In fact, he mostly avoided him. When I asked Olivia about it, she shrugged it off, saying they didn't get along. But Jason watched his dad like he was studying him. Like he knew something I didn't. That night, Jason pulled me aside in the kitchen. His voice was low. He asked if everything was okay. I hesitated, unsure of how much to say. But something in his eyes told me he already knew there was more going on. He didn't press me. He just said, if anything feels off, you don't owe anyone silence. And suddenly, I wasn't just scared. I was confused. What did he know that I didn't? I couldn't stop thinking about what Jason said. You don't owe anyone silence. It played in my mind on repeat like a warning and a promise at the same time. I kept wondering, had he seen something before? Had something already happened in this house that no one ever talked about? The way he looked at his father, the distance between them, it wasn't just your usual father-son tension. It felt deeper. Like a quiet war that had been going on for years. That evening, Olivia's dad offered to drive me to the store to grab snacks. It was such a normal suggestion, said in front of Olivia and Jason like it was no big deal. But my stomach twisted. I didn't want to go. I made up an excuse, saying I wasn't feeling great, and hoped that would be the end of it. But Jason cut in and said he'd take me instead. The look between him and his dad was quick but sharp. Like they were both aware of something they weren't saying out loud. In the car, Jason stayed quiet at first. Then, out of nowhere, he said, "You're not crazy." I looked at him, heart pounding, waiting for him to explain. But he didn't. He just stared straight ahead, jaw tight, gripping the steering wheel like he was holding something back. I wanted to ask him 100 questions, but I was too afraid of the answers. The silence between us said more than words ever could. When we got back, I noticed Mr. Thompson wasn't in the living room anymore. Olivia was upstairs, and the house felt unusually still. Jason walked me to the guest room and said quietly, "Keep your door locked tonight." And then he left without saying anything else. That warning alone was enough to send chills through me. Around midnight, I woke up to the sound of footsteps again. Slow. Measured. This time, there was no doubt. I sat up, heart hammering in my chest, and reached for my phone, hands trembling. The hallway light flickered under the door, and the handle moved just a little. My door was locked. But I couldn't breathe. I texted Jason, not knowing what else to do. Then came a knock. Soft. Barely there. But it was real. I froze. Everything was leading to this moment. The fear. The confusion. The unanswered questions. I didn't know who I could fully trust anymore, or what would happen if that door opened. The knock at the door was followed by silence. No voice. No footsteps walking away. Just stillness, like the person on the other side was waiting, listening. My body was frozen, but my thoughts were racing. I didn't know if it was Mr. Thompson or someone else. I didn't know what his intentions were. All I knew was that something wasn't right, and this moment was the confirmation I had been dreading. I sat still, barely breathing, and waited. I kept staring at my phone, hoping Jason would reply. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. Nothing. I didn't want to call and make a sound. I didn't even want to move. Eventually, the hallway light flicked off, and whoever was outside walked away, but the creak of the floorboards made it clear they hadn't gone far. I didn't sleep a second that night. I stayed curled up with the blanket over me, waiting for the sun to rise. By morning, Jason still hadn't responded. I checked the time, 6:42 a.m., and stepped out of the room. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I tiptoed down the hall and noticed Jason's door was slightly open. I knocked softly. No answer. I peeked inside. His bed was made, and he wasn't there. My stomach dropped. Something felt wrong. I went downstairs, trying to stay calm. Olivia was in the kitchen, pouring cereal like everything was normal. I asked if she'd seen Jason that morning. She said no, he'd probably gone out for a walk. He did that sometimes when he couldn't sleep. I nodded, pretending to accept that answer, but my gut told me there was more to the story. Then, just as I was about to head back upstairs, I noticed something strange. Jason's car keys were still sitting on the hallway table. He hadn't driven anywhere. And his shoes, his only pair, were still by the door. That didn't make sense. I felt a sudden chill crawl up my spine. I didn't want to panic, but the pieces weren't adding up. I started wondering, had something happened to him after he left me last night? Had he seen something? Or worse, had someone seen him? And then came the second twist. Olivia's mom called. She wasn't supposed to be back for another 2 days, but she called Olivia sounding frantic. I couldn't hear every word, but from what I picked up, she was upset, something about Jason not answering and "Tell your father I've been calling." Olivia brushed it off and told her everything was fine. But when she hung up, she looked shaken. She sat there for a second, staring at her phone like she was trying to convince herself she believed her own words. Later that afternoon, Olivia quietly slipped into my room while I was packing my things. She didn't say anything at first. Then she looked at me and whispered, "Something's not right with my dad, and I think Jason knows things he's never told me." My heart stopped. Because now it wasn't just me questioning everything. It was Olivia too. When Olivia finally said those words, that something wasn't right with her dad, I felt a wave of both fear and relief crash over me. I wasn't alone anymore. Someone else finally saw it. And not just someone, her, the one person who had known him her entire life. I could see it in her face. The confusion. The quiet shock. The way her mind was racing, probably connecting dots she had ignored for years. I told her about the night before. About the knock. About Jason telling me to lock the door. Her hands started trembling. She said she hadn't heard from Jason either, not even a text. That was it. We both knew we couldn't sit with this any longer. We needed answers. We went to check the security cameras. Mr. Thompson always had them installed around the house. It took us some time to figure out the login, but Olivia remembered the password eventually. We sat in her dad's study, scrolling through the footage, our hearts racing with every minute that passed. That's when we saw it. Around 2:13 a.m., just hours after Jason walked me to my room, the camera on the side of the house picked him up walking into the backyard. A few minutes later, Mr. Thompson followed. But that's where the footage ended. No more clips. No motion recorded. The rest of the files for that night were missing. Olivia gasped. She knew her dad had access to delete the footage manually. That's when it really hit her, this wasn't just about me. This wasn't just discomfort or strange behavior. Something had happened, and her dad was hiding it. We called her mom. Olivia didn't hold back. She told her everything, how Jason was missing, how the camera footage was wiped, how I had felt unsafe. Her mom went silent for a long moment. Then she said something neither of us expected. I've suspected him for a long time, but I never had proof. Olivia's face went pale. She looked at me with wide eyes. Everything started falling into place. Her mom had lived in that house for decades. She must have seen signs. Maybe she'd ignored them. Maybe she didn't want to break the family. But now the truth couldn't be buried. By evening, her mom had arrived early from her trip, and the police were involved. We gave them everything, the footage, the missing items, the timeline. And just when we thought the worst part was over, Jason walked through the front door. Dirty. Exhausted. But alive. He had gone into hiding after overhearing his dad talking on the phone in the garage, discussing me. Planning something. He didn't know what to do, so he left without saying a word, afraid he'd be stopped. He went to an old friend's cabin, trying to figure out how to protect me without making it worse. The danger had passed, but the damage was done. Olivia's world had cracked open. Mine had, too. But the final twist? Mr. Thompson was gone. Disappeared. Left behind only a suitcase and a single note, "You never really knew me at all." The moment Jason walked through the door, everything shifted. Olivia broke down crying, half in relief, half in shock. We finally had answers, but the weight of it all didn't disappear overnight. Jason sat with us and told the full story. He had overheard his dad making a call late at night, talking about me, using words that made Jason's blood run cold. That was the final red flag. He knew he had to get out, but he didn't know who he could trust. So he vanished, afraid that if he stayed, something terrible would happen. He never expected his silence would cause so much fear. The police opened an official investigation. With the footage we managed to recover, our testimonies, and Jason's account, the case became serious. But Mr. Thompson was already gone. No one had seen him since the night Jason left. His phone was off. His credit cards had no activity. It was like he had vanished into thin air. That note he left? It haunted Olivia more than anything else. "You never really knew me at all." She read it over and over, trying to understand how the man who raised her had hidden so much darkness beneath such a calm surface. Olivia's mom filed for separation. She moved out a week later, taking Olivia with her. We talked a lot during that time, about growing up, about trust, and how hard it is when someone you love turns out to be someone you never really knew. Our friendship grew stronger. Not because we shared pain, but because we faced the truth together. We didn't let fear break us. As for me, I went back to my apartment and I took time to heal. I had moments where I questioned myself, wondered if I had somehow made it all bigger than it was. But I reminded myself, intuition is powerful. And when something doesn't feel right, it's okay to speak up even if your voice shakes. Looking back, this wasn't just a story about one dangerous night. It was about paying attention. About listening to your instincts. About how betrayal doesn't always come from strangers, sometimes it comes from the people we trust most. And while we may never find out exactly where Mr. Thompson went or what else he had been hiding, one thing is clear, we got out. We were heard. And in the end, we found safety, not in a house, but in truth, courage, and the people who stood by us when everything fell apart. A true infidelity story, yes. But also a story about survival, strength, and what it means to take back your power. 19.